Jaya Radhaman Hova Kunya Bihari Radhaman Hova Kunya Bihari Jaya Radhaman Hova Kunya Bihari Ramadhova Gopi Nanabalaba Irivadanati Gopi Nanabalaba Irivadanati Bhagire Varada Yasonanan Jana Braja Janaran Jana Yasonanan Nana Braja Janaran Jana Jamuna Tera Manachare Yamuna Tera Manachare Jaya Radhamadhova Kunya Bihari Jaya Radhamadhova Kunya Bihari Gopi Janabalaba Irivarudare Gopi Janabalaba Irivarudare Janabadaba Ire Vadadane So Danana Praja Janaranjana Yasudanana Praja Janaranjana Jamuna Tera Manachare Yamuna Tera Manachare Jaya Radhamadhova Kunya Bihari Jaya Radhamadhova Kunya Bihari Radhamadhova Kunya Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramangsa Paravitakacharya, all Suteta, such as Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Charanana, Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON, founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shitwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopidat Shaima Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavanam ki jai. Mathuralamba ki jai. Jagannath Swami ki jai. Yamunamai ki jai. Shrimati Tulasi Devi ki jai. Savita Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Gaur. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Budale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Samaniti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharde Nivashesha Shanyavadi Paschachate Shatarni. So today we are reading from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 74th chapter, text 44. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Shabda Kolo Atashich Shishupale Hate Mahan Dashanu Yayano Bhupa Dudruvor Jivitaishina Shabdakula Holotrashich Chishu Pale Hate Mahan Tashanu Yayan Hobupa Dudruvar Jivitaishana Shabda Kulahalo Chashich Chishu Pale Hate Mahan Tashanu Yaino Bhupa Dudruvar Jivitaishana Shabda Kolagalo Chashich Chishu Pale Hate Mahan Tashanu Yain Hobupa Dudruvar Jivitaishana. Okay. Ladies. Okay. Shabda, a sound. Kolahala, uproar. Ata, thereupon. Asit, there was. Shishupale, Shishupala. Hate, being killed. Mahan, huge. Tasha, his. Anuyayana, followers. Pupa, kings. Dudruvu, fled. Ejivita, their lives. Ashana, hoping to save. So translation, when Shishupala was thus killed, a great roar and howl went up from the crowd. Taking advantage of that disturbance, a few kings who were supporters of Shishupala quickly left the assembly out of fear for their lives. So you can repeat, when Shishupala was thus killed, a great roar and howl went up from the crowd. Taking advantage of that disturbance, the few kings who were supporters of Shishupala quickly left the assembly out of fear for their lives. So the purport is just an explanation that this is, the above translation is taken from Srila Prabhupada's Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And just quickly read some of the Acharya's commentaries. There was a huge uproar. Instead of atta, sometimes a p is seen, indicating the whole. Some shouted loudly, victory, victory. And Sanatana Goswami also said there was a huge uproar. Some lamented, some said, very good. Some shouted loudly, victory, victory. Or there was an uproar because some lamented and some were joyful. Kolahala imitates the sound made. Poetic. Shishupala's followers left interested in their lives, not dharma. They quickly left the festival of the sacrifice, fearing death. So I'm just going to read the next text and we'll comment on that. Text 45, I'll just read it. Chaija deho titam jyotir vasudevam upavashat pashyatam sarvabhutanam urkeva bhuvi kochuta. An effulgent light rose from Shishupala's body, and as everyone watched, entered Lord Krishna, just like a meteor falling from the sky to the earth. So, purport by the followers of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai. In this connection, the Acharyas remind us that Shishupala is actually one of the Lord's eternal associates playing the part of a belligerent demon. Thus, to most observers, it appeared that Shishupala achieved the impersonal liberation of merging into Lord Krishna's bodily effulgence. In fact, after being liberated from his mortal frame, Shishupala returned to the side of his master, the Supreme Lord of the spiritual world. The following verse further explains this. So, some of the commentaries by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the spiritual body being eternal in the form of a light, like a comet falling from the sky, Shishupala rose up to Vaikuntha. He therefore merged into Krishna, within whom the Lord of Vaikuntha had merged. He remained inside Krishna at the side of his Lord of Vaikuntha. At the end of Krishna's earthly pastimes at Prabhasa Kshetra, he would go to Vaikuntha along with his Lord. The master of Vaikuntha, the popular view, however, is that Shishupala attained Sayuja, which means merging, with Krishna at the Raja Suya sacrifice. And Jiva Goswami says, there was a light, this was merged with his form, which could not be seen, since his form as an associate of the Lord is actually indestructible. So Jiva Goswami gives a little bit different take on that he immediately assumed or manifested. I wouldn't say assumed because the form is always there. He manifested his four-handed form as one of the Vaikuntha associates. Of course, we do find it described in Chaitanya Leela that these two personalities, Jai and Vijay, became rascals in Chaitanya Leela, isn't it? Jagai and Madai. So there's different descriptions of the Acharyas, so I'm not going to question that. And finally, Sanatana Goswami states, a light immediately entered into Krishna, son of Vasudev, who was nearby Upa. He again became an associate and met the Lord. Again, he says he became an associate and met the Lord. So interesting. The light was like a meteor. Thus, with astonishment, all beings looked on, though it was impossible for him to be a light, since he had a form as an associate. He entered the Lord in this manner in order to give joy to the devotees who knew the truth, understanding that he had attained a body again as an associate. Interesting. Different angles of vision there. Anyway, so Om Gana Timiranda Shah, Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Unmeditam, Yena Tasmai Shigurave Namaha. So let's talk about the example he sets. Not so much this particular instance, because if you go by this instance, he's an eternal associate of the Lord. And what do we learn from this? Well, one thing we see, at least from external vision, is that he was insanely conscious of the Lord, obsessed. Just like we have this disease, obsessive compulsion, right? When someone just can't stop speaking about someone. Actually, I was reading last night from the Chaitanya Charitamrita about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was completely obsessed also, because he was in the mood of Srimati Radharani, and he was obsessed with Krishna. You know, he's talking like a madman. Shishupal was also acting like a madman. So there's material madness, spiritual madness, and spiritual madness is called Divyan Mada, transcendental madness. It's not that you just get out of material madness and then you become nothing. After you're liberated, well, the way you get out of material madness, obsession, is you become detached. Isn't it? For example, we have a nice Buddhist person here. So the Four Noble Truths, you know, the material existence is suffering. Obsession in this world is suffering, isn't it? You're completely obsessed with something. I must have it, I must have it. Just like yesterday, Amarendra Prabhu was talking about, this is quite interesting. He was talking about, you know, about Vacho Vegam, the pushings, where you have to have it right away. I can't see anything right here in this room I want right away, because I can't eat any of you, and none of you are rich, so, you know, anyway, so I can't really be obsessed here. So, but you want it right away, so this obsession, so, and you don't even consider logic. Like here is Shishupal, not even thinking, hey, we're opposing probably the majority of people here. Everyone's raising their swords. There's Krishna, he's known to have a nunchuck. Oh, sorry, Sudarshan Chakra. I'm just teasing. You know, it would seem that he would use, but when you're obsessed, you forget about reality. Just like a young boy obsessed with a girl or a girl obsessed with a boy. And you forget. You run into a lamppost, or hopefully you're not driving a car. That would be a disaster. So it's just stupid. You become stupid, right? Nunam pramata kurute vikarma yadindriya priti aprinoti, right? Lord Rishabhadev says. One becomes pramada. Still more mad. Prabhupada described that. Prakristi rupena jayate. Still more mad. So anyway, so Lord Chaitanya also. And anyway, so Shishupal, his madness, not talking about him as an eternal associate of the Lord. You know, that's a completely different subject matter. Remember, it's an example. His madness was craziness, but he was fortunate to be mad at God. You know, because he's thinking of God. So this is really interesting. He was mad at God because of, you know, anyway, the pastime, fear, envy. His consciousness was fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because of that, he got liberation. Of course, I know he went back to God, but I'm just talking as an example again. And we see many examples of that, people who are obsessed on something, and that determines their fate in the future. Of course, Bhagavad Gita, everybody's familiar with that verse, what yam yam vapi smaran bhavam yajate ante kalevaram. That whatever you're thinking of at the time of death, of course, it's not that you're just thinking of it at the time of death. You have to be cultivating that thought. It's not that, you know, all of a sudden you're in nonsense, you know, it's going to the disco. Okay, it's time to die, Prabhu. Okay, call the devotees. Okay, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Okay. No, it doesn't work like that. You can't cheat Krishna. Because basically, whatever you've been cultivating, when you, the thoughts you've been cultivating, when you actually get ready to leave your body, you're not going to have control of your mind anymore. Just like if any of you have ever had a fever, it's hard to control the mind. You know, you've been trying to chant japa and focus on the mind. Or if you're overtired, right? You haven't got enough rest the night before, you just can't focus. And so the mind just goes to whatever your consciousness is like. You've been cultivating at that particular point. So anyway, so getting back, there's very interesting stories in the Vedic literatures, how someone is really focused and that determines their destination. Of course, one of the funniest stories in the Bhagavatam is the Pururava story. You know Pururava? He was really attached to Urvasi. I mean, at one point, he was just running around, after she left him, he was just running around the world looking for her. Where? You know, it's like the Goswamis of Vrindavan, Hey Radhe, Brajadevake, Hey Nanda Shuno Kuta, Oh Radharani, oh Krishna, where are you? Instead, oh Urvasi, wherefore art thou Urvasi? Of course, that's Shakespeare. You know, the other night we were talking about this, that there's so many stories, even outside of Krishna consciousness, about people who are very attached. I mean, there's the whole story about Rapunzel. Remember that story? No, you don't know the story. So it's a Western story. There's a man who's very attached to a woman. She was in a tower in a castle because her parents didn't want her to associate with him. So she let her hair down, and he climbed up her hair like 50 meters in the air just to see her enter into the tower. And so her parents caught her at that, and then they decided they cut off her hair, but they still let her hair down. The guy climbed up to the top. He got shot. Anyway, never heard the story? There's so many stories like that because someone was insane. So anyway, Pururava, he was so insanely attached that he decided to do a fire sacrifice at the end of his life because it came time to Treta Yuga, you know, you have to do fire sacrifices. Because in Satya Yuga, you're supposed to meditate on your girlfriend. and it's true. I mean, that's why he was meditating in such a yuga. The yuga's changed. That's what the Bhagavatam says. I'm not making this up. And so then in Treta Yuga, he decides the way to connect to your girlfriend is a fire sacrifice. So he performs a fire sacrifice, meditating on the Arani wood and picturing the wood. One piece of wood is him, and other pieces of wood is his girlfriend, Urvasi. And then he goes back to home, back to Urvasi. So, you know, really, so that's concentration at the time of death. You know, and getting back to Krishna's pastimes, that is a pastime of the Bhagavatam, then you have Putana, who was definitely concentrated on Krishna, and she was concentrated in hate, too, but she became a mother. And she wasn't Jaya and Vijay, or someone who came from the spiritual world, right? But she actually went back to Godhead in spite of being demoniac. So Krishna is very merciful. And of course you have Kubja, who was attracted simply out of lust, but she was obsessing. The whole point is obsession. That's the point I'm making. Agasura, who got Swarupaya Mukti. He got the same form as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what to speak of that interesting individual, Pondraka. You know Pondraka? Pondraka not only was a good Mayavadi, you know, Mayavadis say, I'm God, you're God, we're all God, but even dressed up like God. You know, you got to be pretty stupid. He was so obsessed and so envious, he dressed up like the person he hated. I mean, sometimes, actually, I've seen that sometimes with people really attached to Krishna. They start to, you know, act in a certain way, like imitating Krishna, like the gopis did when they were feeling separation, isn't it? They imitated Krishna's pastimes. One gopi would stand on top of another gopi, and one gopi was the Kaliya serpent, the other one was Krishna, and another gopi was Putana, and Krishna was sucking her life air out. And so it's also a sign, it's actually also a sign of extreme love. Just like I remember my godbrother, Sridhar Maharaj, it's my godbrother, Sridhar Maharaj, and he, in his final days in this world, he came to Mayapur, I was there with him, and he had severe liver problems. You know, he had hepatitis C, untreated hepatitis C. So he came before Lord Nrsingadev, and immediately he, you know, his hands went up like that. And so it's a sign of love. You know, sometimes Prabhupada would be talking and go like that. Krishna's playing his flute. And, you know, we also imitate Lord Chaitanya, don't we? We raise our hands, and it's a Swami dance. Nowadays, people don't do that anymore. Now they do the bugaloo. But anyway, but the Swami dance, isn't it? It was so beautiful. And when Prabhupada was guiding us, Prabhupada had the men on one side and women on the other side, which is all right. Not back and forth, like some temples do. And everybody was swaying. It was almost like rhythmic, wasn't it? Purvaji, you remember that? It was like I remember Los Angeles, it was a beautiful sight, everybody. No, and Lord Chaitanya, you remember Lord Chaitanya when you go like this. I mean, I don't remember Lord Chaitanya when I go like this. But when I go like that, I remember Lord Chaitanya automatically. So, anyway, so even the bodily action. So anyway, Pondraka, I was talking about Pondraka. So he'd like dressed up as Krishna, even tied 2 extra arms on himself, right? He had a chakra and a club and everything like that. And even thought he was Krishna. Because he said, Krishna, give up your Sudarshan chakra. Now, that's pretty stupid. That's the last thing I would ask Krishna for. Isn't it? Isn't it the last thing you'd ask Krishna for? Give me your citizen chakra. I mean, I would say Krishna tapped me on the head with a conch shell, whatever. Bless me with the lotus flower. But forget about your club and forget about your chakra. You got to be pretty obsessed to ask Krishna for his chakra. So he asked Krishna, give up your citizen chakra. And Krishna said, okay, buddy. Catch. Right? So that's an obsession. And anyway, and he took forearm four, he got Sarupya Mukti. It's interesting, even though he was a rascal, but he was absorbed in the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the question is, we have to come to that point too, not of Pundraga's point, unless you want to lose your head. We do want to lose our head over Krishna, that is true, but not in that particular way. So we have to come to the point, and there's interesting verses in the Bhagavatam that talk about absorption in different modes with Krishna. I was joking the other night with a devotee. I said, look, if to get you to Mangalarti and you hate Krishna, you could just go before Krishna, just come on time, and that'll be an impetus for you, Oh, Krishna, I hate you. But at least get up from Mangalarti. Anyway. Figure out your motivation. So in the Bhagavatam, it's a beautiful verse in the 7th canto, 1st chapter, text 26. And I could read the Sanskrit real quickly. Tasmad vaivanu mondena nirvairena vayena va snehat kamena va yujat akatha chin nekshate patak. Therefore, by enmity or by devotional service, this is the recommendation, by fear, by affection, or by lusty desire, by all of these, or any one of them, if a conditioned soul somehow or other concentrates his mind upon the Lord, the result is the same. I mean, the same and different simultaneously. I think I have to really, Chincha Beta Beta Tattva, one and different simultaneously, because it depends on how you meditate on the Lord. For example, I wouldn't be interested in Sarupya Mukti. I don't want four hands. Got enough trouble with two, what to speak of four hands. So, because of his blissful position, is never affected by enmity or friendship. That's another important point. Krishna's not affected personally. Everything is merciful. And actually, Prabhupada explains it in the purport. From this verse, one should not conclude that because Krishna is unaffected by favorable prayers or unfavorable blasphemy, one should therefore blaspheme the Supreme Lord. This is not the regulative principle. Bhakti yoga means anukulyena krishnana silanam. In other words, favorable, doing what Krishna wants, and loving Krishna. And then Prabhupada here talks about Shishupal. And there's two more quotes I want to read, and I'll just read the translation. It's from the 7th canto. It's from a purport. A grass worm confined in a hole in the wall by a bee always thinks of the bee in fear and enmity, and later becomes a bee simply because of such remembrance. Similarly, if a conditioned soul somehow or other thinks of Krishna, who is Satchidananda Vigraha, they will become free from their sins, whether thinking of him as their worshipful Lord or an enemy. Because of constantly thinking of him, they will regain their spiritual bodies. Wow. Somehow or other think of Krishna. Now, what is the first regulative principle? Always remember Krishna. Second one is never forget Krishna. And actually, the other one is exactly the same. It's a verse that says the same thing. But I want to read from Prabhupada's purport to this particular verse in the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says, quoting from Bhagavad Gita 4:10, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they attained me. And Prabhupada says, they attain transcendental love for me. There are two ways of constantly thinking of Krishna, as a devotee or as an enemy. A devotee, of course, by his knowledge and tapasya, becomes free from fear and anger and becomes a pure devotee. Similarly, an enemy, although thinking of Krishna inimically, thinks of him constantly and also becomes purified. This is confirmed elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says, and famous verse, Apichet suratro bhajate mam ananyabhat sarvevacha mantavya samyagyafasito hisa. I'm not going to read the whole thing because there's very little time left, but there's a lot of things in the purport here about this. And so anyway, so what I wanted to talk about is how can we become absorbed in Krishna in the same way. I mean, I had other topics that I had written down here for class, but there's no time. So what are the methodologies that we can utilize for becoming obsessed with Krishna? Okay. First of all, there's Navabhakti, the 9 processes of devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting. Because when we hear and chant, Satam Prasanga Mama Virya Sambhava, Bhavanti Ritkarna Rasayana Kata, Tajoshanadashu Apavarga, Vartmani Shraddha Ratir Bhakti Anukramishati, in the association of devotees, then from the ear holes, karna, to the rit, the heart, there's a transmission. And when you hear from the pure devotees, especially someone like His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, then the saffron dust particles of the lotus feet of the Lord are contained within that sound vibration. Even if you hear the same thing over and over and over and over again, just like every morning I'm listening to Prabhupada's class, I've heard every class already, but you hear it over and over again, and it's just like you dive deeper. Material sound vibration, you can't dive deeper. It's just like, okay, let's hear something else. It's boring after a while. Been there, seen it, done it, as the saying goes. So 9 processes of devotionals from the right person or with the right persons. Otherwise, it can have adverse effects. You become more attached to the material world. That's a statement. Vaishnava Makol Girnam Putam Harikatamritam Shavanam Naiva Kartavyam Sharpo Chistiyatapayam. That's from the Hari Bhakti Shuddhaya. Sanatana Goswami wrote that if one hears about Krishna from someone who's not a Vaishnava or someone who's not, attached to Krishna, then actually Sarpo Chistiyatapayam. One becomes poisoned by a snake. So that's another way. And another important way to do it is, Prabhupada talks about this in the Bhagavad Gita, that according to our nature, we become attached to our service. That, of course, famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmarpanam Brahma Havir Brahmagno Brahmano Hudam Brahmatena Gandavyam Brahma Karma Samadhinam. If you're absorbed in your service for Krishna, like if you're building a temple or if you're cooking an offering for Krishna, you'll go back to Godhead. So, but that means according to our psychophysical nature. Prabhupada in the Gita says, in the beginning one becomes attached to the activity or the service. Later on, one becomes absorbed in the bhakti rasa. So that's a step to become absorbed. Do you understand? So right now, for those of us who are on this earth planet, like myself, I mean down to earth, so to speak, for those of us who are on the consciousness, not pure consciousness right now, it's very easy to get attached to something for Krishna, doing something for Krishna. I mean, anything for Krishna, if it's actually for Krishna according to the directions of Krishna's representative, because that verse I quoted from the Bhagavad Gita says, if you make a contribution to Brahman, full contribution to Brahman, then the offering becomes absolute. Your conscious person making the offering becomes absolute. The process of making the offering becomes absolute. So everything becomes absolute in the service. Even if you're, let's say you're doing accounting, just playing with numbers, not playing, just using numbers for the temple. Then that means samadhi. That's absorption. So that's how we become, right now, a practical step. And of course, we also have our deity worship we perform. You get attracted to Krishna, just like I just ordered a whole bunch of new pictures of the deities, real. These pictures are like, what are they, like several feet tall, several feet wide, just to put in my house. There's, you don't want to get too crazy and put Krishna's picture on your steering wheel, so every time you turn it around, Krishna just flips. Anyway, there's many. Okay. Oh, all right. Stereo. Sounds like the dead are waking up. We should do that in the Brahmachari ashram every morning. That would be a good idea. Thank you for giving me that idea. I'll get a conch shell.
Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Samasitam Buddha Sundaranam Tandar Agom Vidamaniya Vishesha Shobha Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Pulakas Sharir Hare Hare Bulite Nayane Babinir Goranga Bulite Habe Pulakas Sharir Hare Hare Bulite Nayane Babinir Arakabe Nichai Chandera Kuruna Hoipe Samsara Pashana Mura Kabe Tucha Hoibe Jai Chandera Karuna Hoipe Samsara Dvashana Mora Kapetucha Urbe Vishaya Chatri Kambe Shurabe Mana Kabe Amare Rabbo Shri Vindavana Vishaya Chodi Akabe Shurabe Mana Kabe Amare Rabbo Shri Vrindavana Rupa Pade Hoy me hago cutir Kabe Amare Rabbo Se Jugala Puti Rupa Raghunatha Pade Hoy me hago cutir Kabe Amare Rabbo Se You gotta retain Rupa Raghunatha Pade Rahumahur Asha Ratana Kore Sada Narottama Das Rupa Raghunatha Nakore Sada Goranga Pulite Habe Ulakat Sharir Hariate Pulite Nayane Mabene Galite Ulakat Rare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Magore Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Paravidakacharya ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Nantagoti Vaishnava Vrinda Namacharya Friends, say Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shivaya Radhan Shivasani Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Shri Radha Krishna Govardhana Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Maturam Ki Jai Swami Ki Jai Punamai Ki Jai Srimati Lalasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hare all glorious the assembled devotees all glorious the assembled devotees all glorious the assembled devotees all glorious to Shri Guru and Gauranga Shubhopad Ki Jai Jaito Darpanamarjanam Baba Mahadvagni Nevapadam Jaya Kairavya Chandrika Vitaranam Vijavada Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pranamritaspadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Nam Akari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktish Tatrapita Mamapi Duradaiva Madrishani Hanani Nana Raga Trinada Peace and Uchena Dora Peace Hishnuna Manina Manadena Kirtaniya Sada Hare Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitamba Jagadish Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmanishvare Bhavatad Bhakti Radhai Chakitwaye Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tava Padapankaja Sita Duli Sadrasam Vachintaya, Nayanam Galuda Shrudaraya, Vadanam Gadgada Rudya Gira, Pulaka Nichitamba Pukada, Tava Nama Grahane Bhavishyati, Yugaitam Nimishena Chakshusha Pravachaitam, Shunyaitam Jagat Sarvam, Govinda Vidahename, Asli Shiva Padapanastumam, Adarshanam Armatam Karotuva, Yatad Vada Natu Lampato, Mat Prana Natastu Sevana Paraha. Victory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, congregational chanting of your holy name alone can render all benedictions to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your names. I am so unfortunate, I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen to the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from the ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shikshashtaka ki jai. And so the deities are dressed very beautifully today with flowers grown in New Goloka. And so we want to thank the devotees who dressed the deities, and they've done very, very well. And it's like going back to home, back to God, just being in front of Radha Golokananda. You don't have to leave the material world. You just stay here in front of the deities. So I believe there's a housewarming now. Is that right? Right around the next property over. The housewarming. Everyone's invited. There'll be prasadam for everybody. What's the deal?
Not actually housewarming, but it's a
What?
kirtan. It's not a housewarming, but it's a small kirtan that we want devotees to come and do.
Okay, when will the devotees eat prasadam? Afterwards.
Afterwards.
They come back to the temple.
Come back to Prabhupada Hall and
Okay, that's good. Okay, so a small kirtan, just to,
sorry for short notice because only yesterday evening we decided about going forward. So please come and bless us in the new home.
it's right next to the temple
Right
property.
next to the Prabhupada Hall.
Yeah, it's very